What would you say to the following statement? We're all created to be creative. Over the years, I've had this conversation many times with many different people, and the responses seem to be pretty much along the same lines. But I can't even draw stick figures. I used to roll my eyes at this response and just think, well, I get what you're saying, you can't draw, I get you. But over the years, my response has changed from roll of the eye to a slight frustration. Somehow, we've learned to limit creativity to drawing, to painting, and that is the beginning and the end of it. I really believe that this false idea stems from this unrealistic and unfair comparison that we create in our own minds. You see, we often have this preconceived idea in our heads of what creativity ought to be. So even people who are really creative have this idea. Even they struggle with this. Somewhere along the line, we learned and we got taught what counts and what doesn't, forgetting about every other expression that exists. We only view creativity as traditional art forms. But creativity is expressed in everything. It's all around us. It's literally in creation itself. We were created in God's image, and this is part of His identity, which means it is by default a part of ours. We can't get away from it, and there's something that gets released in us the second we step into it. We have this whole world of creativity inside of us, and the only reason we're not releasing it is because why? Because we can't draw stick figures. What about other art forms? What about other expressions of creativity? We only value one and we completely disregard the rest. What about photographers? What about those into video? What about interior decorators? And not just if it's your profession. What if you just really take care in your home to make it look beautiful? That is a creative expression. What about the cooks and the bakers? Those who take care when they create a meal, who work and express their creativity in the blends of spices that they use. Does that not count as creativity? We have so many different expressions. There's so many ways that we can express it, but we're limited because this is what we've been taught. This is the only way that we know, and we hold that as the standard. I love to draw, and I have my whole life. Until eventually I decided I love it so much, I actually want to do this for a living. I studied graphic design, which incorporates that as an element of it. So for me to go to someone who hasn't drawn in forever, or who hasn't done it in years, and say, here, recreate this image as I have, is completely unfair. So when I propose the idea that we're all creative, there's this instant assumption, but Leilani, it's you. You are that person and I am not. It is an unfair comparison to compare me, who has drawn my whole life, to someone who hasn't. It is completely unfair. It's unfair to look at someone who does this for a living and someone who doesn't. It's still creative and it's still your personal expression. I heard a quote the other day by Teresa Dedman that just completely shifted my mind on this. She said, we need to give ourselves permission to try. Not permission to succeed, not permission to fail even, but just permission to try. I remember being so challenged by this, and I thought of everything that I've been wanting to try, and I just don't give myself permission for, because I have this idea in my head that if I try something, I have to be good at it and it has to look good the first time. We have this false idea about art, that those who are good at it because they're just good at it. The reality of the situation is this: they're good at it because they've worked at it, because they've cultivated a certain skill. If you want to cultivate something, you have to work at it. It won't just be at the first try, it'll be again and again and again. And for us to do that, we need to give ourselves permission to try, permission to step out, permission to mess up. You're not going to be good at everything you try, but are you enjoying it? Is probably a better question. Let me challenge you with this. Try something for the sake of trying, not for the sake of succeeding, not for the sake of even being necessarily creative. Try it because you want to. Try it because you want to be adventurous, because you want to enjoy it. If you have a passion for something, if you have a desire to try something, please try it. Please don't put any pressure on yourself. Can we just decide once and for all that the pressure is off? That we don't have to get everything right all the time? That we don't have to be amazing at everything? You get to just do something because you love it. I noticed a trend a little while ago in famous people who had gone from something like acting and gone to become an artist. The reason they did it, the reason they started doing that, almost always has been because they just looked for a different expression. They didn't want to sell their art, they didn't want to hang it in a museum, they didn't necessarily want to generate an income from it, but they tried, and they just tried for the freedom of it. And you know what happens to most of them? They end up becoming professional artists because they started from the heart. They started from a place of just wanting to create, of just wanting to express, with no pressure, but just creating. Let's take a page out of that book. Let's just start creating for the sake of it, without the pressure, without the hang-up, without the insistence on having it be perfect. Now, don't get me wrong, this is not something that I walk in every day. I've got so many fears, I've got so many things I've been dying to try but haven't. But I want to break out of that, and I want you to join me. I don't want to live in that anymore. I want to do something for the sake of it. I want to try, and I want to give myself permission to do so. Let's stop believing the lie. You, yes you, were created to be creative.